to critical mass. So let's go ahead and get underway today. Thank you everybody for joining today's meeting of March the 7th, 2024. This is the Technical Advisory Council of the Confidential Computing Consortium. If you're here, it's probably because that you are one of us who feels that by working together as a community, we make the world more secure with confidential computing than any of us would be able to do individually or individually through our own companies. This is an open and collaborative group, so if you have not been here before, feel free to speak up with any questions or comment as we go. And we'll invite you to introduce yourself in a couple of slides. Kind of helps everybody feel a little bit more comfortable talking if we've all been introduced. As a collection of companies working together in a consortium, we also abide by the antitrust policy that you can find at linuxfoundation.org. And with that, here's the agenda that we're looking at for today. We'll go through those introductions that I just mentioned. We'll take a quick look at the minutes that were collected in the last meeting, kind of remind ourselves of what we did, and then we'll get into today's topics. We've got about 3-ish announcements to go through, and then we've got Keystone here for their annual update. I think the last note I saw from Dale said that he was targeting the second half of the meeting. So we might move the glossary work up front. And I see we've got Mike on. And will you be able to lead us through that glossary work, Mike?
I can lead you to it. Can't force a horse to drink, but I can. I'll do my best.
That's all I can ask.
You know, donkeys or horses, whatever. I'll go. I'll be the donkey, and I'll see what I can convince you guys to. You folks to be.
Excellent. All right. And were there any other topics that people were expecting to discuss today? Nope. Okay, great. Let's get into it. Take a quick look. So we said we're not going to do formal roll call. I don't think we have any votes today. We had a new contributor from one of our premier companies last time, though, and I do not see them on the invite list, or I mean on the attendee list. So we'll move past that to update one of the contacts. But for the rest of you, if you have not introduced yourself in at least 2 meetings before, feel free to pop off of mute. Let us know where you're coming from, either your company and or where you are in the world, and what your interest in confidential computing is, and how you like to be addressed.
Hey, this is Mingshen. I should be a new member here. Hello. So my name is Mingshen. I'm from TikTok. So I joined TikTok last year, and my main role here is to lead the application, drive adoption and innovation of confidential computing at TikTok. So there are multiple ongoing projects at TikTok using confidential computing. So we want to collaborate with the community to drive this work together. So we'll share you more about the use case and our technical solution. Yeah, thank you.
And where are you based, Mingshen?
I'm based in US West in Silicon Valley.
Excellent. And I should say that as of today, I think TikTok are officially a premier member. Took a bit of time for the legal stuff to go through. Is it today, Ben? Am I right?
Yeah.
So congratulations to TikTok. It's fantastic. Really good to have you as voting members on the board and everywhere else. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, I'll echo that. Great to have TikTok here as a premier company, and Mingshen, great to have you on with us at the TAC. Looking forward to the collaboration.
Yeah, thank you.
There's one or two more names that I might not recognize in the participant list. So if you'd like to, feel free to pop off a mute. And if you're more comfortable doing that later, you can do that as well. All right. So we're not typically going to go through and review minutes formally anymore, but the easiest way to grab the old business for me this week was just to go in and go right into the pull request. So what we talked about last time was we sort of, I guess, pre-announced TikTok if they were not officially signed at that point. But moving on from that, we had several of the projects that came in with their proposals at the end of last year have gotten through all the legal and board stuff. So those were all finalized. So that was a great accomplishment. Appreciate all the work from Rian and Ben getting those things through and in a structured way now with the project board.
May I add something, which I believe that ILET, as of the last few days, has now passed all legal review and is also a full member of the project of the CCC.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting that. So congratulations again to the ILET team.
Yeah.
All right. We introduced the glossary topic last week, and we'll get into that in a minute. And then Sal also brought forward a bunch of materials, I guess, from CNCF about how mentoring and internships work. And those are active in a pull request right now. I think in a subsequent meeting, we'll want to walk through that. We announced the first instance of the kernel SIG. So that was 5 p.m. Pacific last session, so 2 weeks ago. The next one we'll talk about in a minute. And there was a call for project demos for RSA. And then finally, Ben brought us up to speed on our budget, which was we haven't really been spending our budget. And now we're kind of coming up through the first quarter. So just a reminder, once again, the projects that they have budget available to them for things like CI, and we've got travel budget to get project maintainers into conferences to talk about their CCC projects. And then the last thing was building out the tax schedule. So it's not sort of a session by session agenda. We get that built out a little bit more. And so each one of the voting members of the TAC is on point to do a working session or an update on the goal area that they are taking leadership on, as well as recruiting a tech talk.
Well, the TikTok one will be a TikTok tech talk.
Technically.
I've been waiting for that for ages, so it's actually for real. So that's very excellent news.
Run.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Not very sorry.
I'm not even going to try to say that. The fact that you got that out, you know, that's some applause. Okay. I skipped over the announcements, right? So I don't have a separate slide for that. So we just talked about the kernel SIG, and kind of had asked before we got underway the logistics for that. So Rian, do you want to speak to how we get people to the meeting?
The meeting is on our calendar, but it's not on the website yet. I just needed a bit of a tagline. This is what the kernel is about, and I'll add it to the website, and I can also add the link. But what I could do for tomorrow's meeting, which would be at 12 p.m. East Coast time, I could send out the link via the mailing list, the main TAC mailing list, if that would be good.
That would be great.
Good. And as soon as I have the information, I will add it to the website as well. And as soon as we have the first recording, I'll link the YouTube channel there as well, like all the other things.
Thank you.
Hey, one
And
question. Are we also putting the videos on YouTube? Because I would like to watch the last one, or maybe also this one, because I won't be able to join.
Yeah, so we didn't get to the last one captured. So going forward, the intent is that they'll be recorded. We weren't on the LFX meeting platform last time with Zoom, but going forward, that should be the case. And then we'll have a YouTube channel of those, just like we do for most of the SIGs.
Right. Awesome. Thanks.
Good question. And thanks for the reminder, Ryan, that we owe you a blurb for how to describe the kernel SIG.
No problem. Thank you.
And I don't see Kotlin on, but I think he was taking leadership for some of that. So we'll check in with him later. Next thing on the calendar after Friday is middle of next week, we have OC3. That's a pretty big conference for our community, and I didn't know if we had some any last minute announcements or things that people wanted to draw attention to headed into next week. I will say that while people are getting their thoughts together on that, it's traditionally been attended by those of us who are already kind of on the inside view of confidential computing. And I think it's great if you can advertise the conference out to your networks, to people that are working on security but might not be working on confidential computing, and we can kind of start to grow outwards a little bit more. So maybe if somebody has ready access to the registration link for OC3, you might drop that into the chat for everyone's benefit, and we can get that circulated. All right, if there's nothing else on OC3, just look forward to seeing everybody there next week. And then the next session of the TAC meeting 2 weeks out falls during KubeCon. And some of us will be in Jolie, Paris. And it will be, I'm not sure how many of us are going to be there. I will be there. I know some of my colleagues that I work on confidential computing projects will be there. So I'm curious if we would like to punt for next meeting, or if somebody else would like to lead the meeting on the 21st.
I'm unable to be there for either online or in person. I would encourage people to see if you can get together for a drink or a coffee or something in person. Not saying that that's a good place to have an actual meeting, but try and corral people who are there together to do that. But I can't do either, I'm afraid, so I'm not in a position to help out. Sorry.
Yeah, so maybe on Slack for anybody else who will be there, we can try to connect up and get to see each other face to face. So my vote would be to skip the meeting or cancel the meeting of March 21st, unless somebody else wants to run that meeting. Anyone opposed to canceling the meeting?
I mean, there is something we could do in that hour. So I believe we're going to have from GRC, we might have one or two pattern documents on, that we could review. I could run that.
That would be great. A good use of the time.
Yeah, because so the plan is we're creating our own version inside the GRC SIG. Then we're working with CSA on it because we need to push some of that content out through the Cloud Security Alliance. And then eventually these should become official documents of the consortium, at least we're hoping so. And eventually it's going to be a fairly extensive set, but I think the one we are working on to begin with is on payload governance. So basically the idea is, if you take code or you're developing code for confidential computing, you have some existing code, what does it take to actually make confidential computing ready? Right. So, and this goes across things like, you're not guaranteed that your storage is protected. You're not guaranteed that your network is protected. You're not guaranteed that your random number generation is solid, and all of these things you need to take care of. You need to operate in a coordinate with the attestation service. There's all sorts of number of issues, and I would like that to be a collaborative exercise in making sure that it's solid content that is ready for broad adoption. So if there is no other topic on the 20th, I would bring it and we can discuss and collect feedback.
Fantastic. So yeah, so the next meeting, which somebody can double check me on the dates, but March 21st, we can use that as a working session to go impact those compliance documents.
Dan, we also have excuse me, Oclam scheduled for their annual review for that meeting. So should I move that to the next?
It's a 2-hour-long meeting. We could probably do both. I can't
Yeah, we could.
imagine spending 2 hours on patterns.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I just wasn't sure if it made sense given that a lot of folks wouldn't be able to attend.
Yeah,
But-
I'm not sure if it's a lot of folks or it's just me, so I'm not getting
okay. Yeah, we'll keep
Well,
that.
I'm not there either. It doesn't make a difference. Is anyone else wants to declare they won't be there? I mean, that's the other way of looking at it, right?
Yeah.
Who
that
else
might be the
can't
more
make
assertive
it?
question.
Me and Dan.
Rian, okay. So I think if we are going to hold the meeting beyond Mark's topic, I would love for one of the other TSC members to be chairing the meeting. And if nobody is available to chair the meeting, then maybe we just keep it to Mark's topic and we reschedule Oakland.
Yeah, because that is kind of an official reporting out to the group. So we do want to make sure that it is. Yeah.
If it's time critical, I'll agree to chair the meeting. But if it's not time critical, it probably makes sense to do it under your watch, Dan. That's what I'd vote for.
Yeah, I don't think it is time critical. So I appreciate the volunteering should we have needed it. All right, so we will, what we'll do then is we'll keep the meeting on the calendar for the 21st with the understanding that the main topic is just going to be what Mark leads people through to get feedback on the compliance documents.
And I will send out a draft ahead of time for people to comment on. Perhaps, Dan, you can let me know in the private chat what is the best way to reach out to this particular audience. And I could do it on Slack, I can do it on email, I can do it in Slack, but let me know.
Yeah, I would just use the TAC mail list and or the TAC Slack.
Okay, maybe both. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so why don't we go into the glossary? And Mike cautioned me that while we've got a GitHub repo set up, that we want to do more of the early dynamic work over a Google Doc, but I do not have
I think that's what we agreed last time. So let me share my screen. If someone can unshare, then I can share. I can't.
You can't just
currently do
knock
it.
me out.
I can't on this occasion. I'm doing it from the web app, and I think that might be the reason why. Okay, and this is, I believe, the one. So can everybody see this? Try and make it a decent size. Is that plausible? Oh, it's logged in as the wrong account. Log in as the right account, then I can actually make some. Right, there we go. Can everyone see this or not?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. Good. Okay, so the thinking was that we need to have a glossary kind of a la CSA, right? So that it's available and people can read it, and who don't necessarily have the deep technical grounding. The problem with that is that we're looking to define terms which we don't have definitions for at the technical level yet either for all of them. And I think we need to do that. I think as a TAC, we need to agree those so that we can then, if we want to do it, not say dumbed down, but a TAC light version, those are also available. So this is an attempt to start what may well be a 6-month process. It was last time to get some definitions out. And so 5 things were suggested to me, and then a 6th came up as well. So I've tried to produce, with a bit of help from Sal, definitions for all of these 5 things: root of trust, trusted computing or compute base, TEE, confidential computing, attestation, and workload identity. I expect there to be a lot of discussion. And what I would ask people to do is to use the suggesting mode whenever they're editing, and to or add comments in the standard way for Google Docs. Has someone shared a link to this in the chat? I guess they have. There's a number of other people on the thing. Yes, thank you, Rian. You've done that. Okay. So let's start from the top. These are quite opinionated, and partly they're opinionated because a number of them are taken from my book, because I couldn't find. Well, I did look for other alternatives, but I kind of like the ones in my book because I wrote them. So I'm very happy to be told these are wrong. So the first one is what is a root of trust? And the first question is, do we think a root of trust is the same thing as a trust anchor? So I'm not sure. The definition of trust anchor, I think, if you go to Wikipedia, you'll find that you're transferred from root of trust to trust anchor, if I remember rightly. And I have a similar but slightly more complex or specific definition in the book, which is this. And as I say, I also say that it's not the same as a root of trust, but I never actually define what a root of trust is, which isn't great. So question 1, do we want to define a root of trust as something different from a trust anchor? 2, are we happy with any of the definitions around? Please let the discussions begin. Or, and this is up to Dan as you're running it, we can go through each of these definitions and then come back to them. I don't mind which way you want to run it.
Why are we saying static? I don't think that's a fundamental requirement.
So that's a great question, a great immediate question. So again, is that true for an anchor? Is it true for a root of trust? Maybe it's not true for a root of trust, but it's true for an anchor. So these are the sort of questions. Dan, just quickly, so that we have a sort of point of order, are we going to go through all of them? Or are we going to quickly and then come back to them? Or do you want to go?
Yeah, I like that. I think that'll kind of get people's thoughts moving.
Okay, so we've looked at root of trust / trust anchor. The next one is trusted computing or compute base. This is the one that I came up with, and again, I derived this from a number of places. This is what's in the book, and yeah, it's a starting point. I think it covers quite a lot of the major points here. Out, Natalie. Out, she's going to vomit. Out, you go. Out. Sorry.
The thing about TCB that I encountered that is a little funky is that on the same system, like on the same computing system, as you move in and out of a confidential environment, so as you move out of the trust execution environment, what's in the TCB changes. And it can be very, very confusing. So in some of the documents I wrote, I introduced the term CC-TCB to differentiate the two, just to make it very clear.
Absolutely. And I'd go much further than that. You could say that your TCB for the kernel, you have a TCB at the kernel level, TCB for your operating system, TCB at the system level, TCB at the distributed system. It depends on the scope of what you're looking at, and it's probably worth adding something about the importance of scope. Put a note in here.
I keep saying in a lot of meetings I'm in these days, because we write documents and then there is discussion around certain terms or certain nuances of what we do that we discuss, like the group agrees and then move on. And the comment I make is we need Federalist papers, to put context behind these decisions. So I actually recommend that if we have background clarifying information for future generations, why did these bozos decide on this thing and not that thing?
Well, I would point out that what you're saying now is that record, partly because
we're recorded
transcripts of it, because we're recorded, and if we do transcripts of it, we have even more. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't add more to it than that. I absolutely agree. Having some glossing of the glossary is both a very medieval manuscript, but also a very sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
I can't wait till Lin-Manuel Miranda makes the musical of the Confidential Computing Consortium.
Who's going to play whom, though? I have always wanted Idris Elba to play me in something, so I bagged Idris Elba.
Yeah, that's great.
They're very similar in many ways. So, okay, next. Okay, so
I think we're going to fly through these, and then we'll come in and comment on it.
The next one is a TE, and this is taken absolutely from our from a white paper, absolutely intentionally, because that hopefully is the the core definition, and I would hope that this is it sufficient? I don't know. I think these are necessary, maybe not sufficient, but we spent a lot of time, I said 6 months, kind of coming to this, and I think that's worth reusing if we can. If we want to change something different, we need to update the white paper as well, because this is, for us, one of the core primitives. Okay. So the next one is, again, taken directly from our very careful definition of what confidential computing is. If we want to change this, we should absolutely change it elsewhere as well. And we can always do that. It's been a year or so since we last updated it, but this is what we have. So the next one is attestation. Attestation is really difficult, and we know we're supposed to be doing a Wikipedia on this as well. This is what I came up with, leaning heavily on the RATS document, which I didn't reference. Apologies, I should. That needs referencing. But here's what I came up with. Attestation is a process whereby a system produces information about itself, typically cryptographically backed, and another party verifies that information, allowing decisions to be made about what types of trust relationships are appropriate to the first system. I don't talk about verifying parties. I don't, because those are somewhat implementation specific. Sometimes they'll be the same, sometimes they'll be different, the different parties. This was a first attempt. I also didn't use the word remote, because does it need to be remote? Are all the different pieces remote? Don't know. This is a starting point, and it's one which is going to spend, I think we're going to spend a lot of time working on, which is good. I'm really pleased. The last one is workload identity. And this is taken from the Microsoft Learn thing, which Sal found. Not sure if I changed it. Yes, I added this here. So workload identity is an identity which is preferably unique, assigned to software workloads for authentication and access management across services and resources. Does this meet what we want it to do? I don't know. The idea of workload identity being important is one which has been growing throughout the lifetime of the CCC already. And now's a good time maybe to spend some really good hours or days or months or years defining it. So these are the 6 pieces that I've come up with. And we could say that we need to almost work backwards, or maybe not backwards, but is there an order in which we want to look at these? You know, maybe we want to make sure that TE is right first, and then attestation, and then confidential computing. And then I don't know there needs to be an order, but there is some dependency across them. If we get one of them wrong, we could really mess ourselves up on others if we haven't got them in the right order. So, Dan, let me hand it over to you to manage this as you wish.
Yeah, so from like a goal perspective, my sense was we wanted to have plain English definitions, and we would have more accurate and technical descriptions in our other documents. We have the terminology document that goes into a variety of other terms, and I think there was an interest earlier in this year from one of you in bringing that back up for revision. But I just want to level set on the outcome that we're looking for with these definitions.
My assertion is that we cannot do plain English ones unless we've got technically defined ones first. We're just setting ourselves up to fail and for a world of pain. So I think we need to, if we want to do this at all, we need to do this, update the terminology definitions, and then do plain English versions.
So I love that.
Similar.
So for any light definition, we must have a proper definition. Is that a good?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And so as I kind of skim over these, I don't think we've tried to define maybe half of them. Maybe half of them we do have defined in other documents. So some of the work will be revising the terminology document to add these additional.
If we need to, yeah. Again, you know, I think that we're probably okay with TEE. We're probably okay with confidential computing. So that's 2 out of 6. The others may need more work.
Mm-hmm. And so the pattern that we'll have then is that we'll have a somewhat inaccurate definition that should be more approachable in this context, and then a link to the more complete and accurate definition.
Well, I'm suggesting we do the accurate definition here, and then we'll put the, once we've done all this work, we then transfer the bits into various places. And the general definition goes on the website. Well, they probably both do, right? But is the easily searchable glossary on the website, and then the more accurate goes into terminology that is the core record of correctness. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Right.
Okay, so I think I tracked that. I'll just restate it to make sure that at least 2 of us have the same understanding. That we'll try to have complete definitions worked out in this document, and then those will kind of fork out into 2 different directions. We'll have a higher level simplified definition that is approachable on the website, and then a link from there, or just a source link to the full and complete definitions in an updated terminology spec.
That would be my preferred, I think.
How does the TAC feel about putting our opinions into the wiki definitions? I mean, that is sort of like a known source of truth. I would vote in favor of that. What
yeah, so the attestation, we've been saying we should do an attestation Wikipedia entry. We haven't done it yet. And I think that at least 1 or 2 of these definitely should feed into that. And the confidential computing one is pretty close to it already, I think.
Yeah. By the way, attestation generally in the industry is such a washed out term that I really do think we need to stick to remote attestation.
Which is a great comment, and I'm very happy to accept it. And I'm going to put remote.
Like otherwise, without remote attestation, is a little bit like do-it-yourself dentistry, and we should not go there.
I said I'm not going to.
I was thinking about the trusted compute base definition where you referenced a Wikipedia term or Wikipedia article. And you said that it maybe isn't precise enough. At
Mhm.
least
Well,
that's the way
we
I
can
read your
suggest
comment.
an edit to the Wikipedia article. I think most
Yeah.
people, when looking at trust computing base, will actually be going to Wikipedia, not to our documents. We should not, and we should work with the Wikipedia community to work out the kinks.
But Wikipedia is going to be much happier if we can point to a published definition that we've already worked on, so that there should be a.
Well,
do you see what I
certainly,
mean? They
certainly.
like
Either way,
citation.
it's an edit to the
Oh, yeah.
Wikipedia
No,
page to
100%.
add the reference. So,
Yep, agreed.
By the way,
wish I'd
similar with
remembered.
root of trust. Similar with root of trust. That's going to be the same type of thing.
Yeah. I
Like
just wish
remote
that I'd
attestation is
remembered
very
to-
much confidential computing specific, but the other terms are already well established. Like workload identity is the one that really bothers me, because the workload identity group at IETF does not define what that is, and in fact refused to. I emailed them.
So I hadn't defined it as one of the things I was doing, and was encouraged to by Sal. So and Sal had found this definition, so that's kind of where that starts.
Yep.
Okay, so I was going to go to add some of this understanding we just worked through in the top of the document, but I do not have edit access. So
everyone should have edit access, I thought. Let me do share. Anything? I apologize. I'm very bad. I'd meant to do. Everyone should now. You may need to reload it in the window you're in, but everyone should now have edit access. So I do apologize, everyone.
excellent.
So there's always so much we can do in these TAC meetings and discussing, and I like that. But please, 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 take some time out in your day when you've got a boring moment and you want to be even more bored. You can add to this document and bore other people as well, or excite them with your erudition and insight.
And maybe just to ask on like best practices here, so how far do you want to make the discussion on these terms? Because I guess if everyone changes, I don't know, the definition to whatever they
Yeah,
think that's probably not the most
good,
worthwhile.
Yeah, good practice in the past has been if you've got a general comment or question that you think needs some discussion, you add it as a comment. If you've got a single word that you think is going to be helpful and probably not contentious, then you add it as a suggested. So you do suggesting rather than editing here, right? And then we can all see. But once someone suggested something, it's not removed without discussion. And generally, what tends to work well is we have a bunch of discussions and a few suggestions in the text, and then we have another online meeting and synchronously go through those and try and reduce them, as it were, as a sort of eigenvalue approach. That's a long time ago. I did eigenvalues for matrices in maths, but do you see what I mean? That's kind of, I think, a good way of doing it. So we sort of accrue comments in the odd edit, and then we have synchronous meetings where we can pare them down.
Sure, makes sense.
Does that work for everyone? It's worked very well in the past. I mean, this is always difficult. There's quite a few of us. A number of us are very opinionated, which is fine. And so, we just need to be respectful of each other to the extent that we can be, and do it like that.
Okay, why don't we throw 15 minutes into root of trust here, and we can go from there.
Okay. So the first question was from Mark, I think, was, do we need the word static in there? Oh, actually, first question is, do we want to define root of trust or trust anchor? Do we believe they're different or not? Let's follow this and see where it takes us. I think if we do
I think
root of
fewer
trust,
terms of better, and if you choose to define both, then you need to also explain the difference between the two, and I don't think there is one.
Yes, again, I said to I tried to here and then realized that I'd never actually fully described them as different. I
mean,
one of the things
we can say
about
they're
root
aliases.
of trust is, sorry?
We could say they're aliases.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what Wikipedia does. It just redirects, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's add here trust anchor. So we're now talking about the same thing. Okay, so that's a good thing. And unless the other thing, of course, is we need to be aware that not everyone will make every TAC call. So if we keep some of these edits in the document for people to review later on or to pass to colleagues or whatever, that's a good thing too. Okay, so it looks like we are immediately adding this here.
I
So
have no academic basis to point to for this, but I have, I guess, without thinking about it much, thought of the root of trust as the key or the certificate that's embedded in the hardware. And I think of the trust anchor as the entity that provisioned that. So I think of a trust anchor like a certificate authority and the root of trust like the artifact that is in the device.
So I would say that what you're talking about as the second of those is an endorsing authority, which is the word that you'll see here, which is the thing that you end up just trusting because you have to. There's something at some point you have to trust it. Then you have an anchor on which you can build things, right? So I think it's worth separating those two terms, and they are separated elsewhere in the literature as well. So what you've referred to, yeah, the CA would be an endorsing authority there.
I'm not sure I agree, to be honest. Interestingly, I was about to make the same point that Dan made, just interestingly vice versa. So I was gonna go particularly the other way around. And now that you say that now that you also threw the endorsement authority in there, I feel like that should also be the same there, no? Because to some degree, what do you talk then about as what is then the root of trust for you? Is it the certificate itself that is signed by the authority, or what is then the root of trust for you if it's not the endorsement authority?
So
giving trust to a root of trust is a trust for the root of trust party to establish an endorsing authority.
Say that again, Nathaniel.
Granting trust to the party that controls a root of trust is a statement of trust about that root of trust owner building an endorsement authority. Right? You're typically not going to have a certificate chain that only contains the root of trust and then directly signs end artifacts. There's usually going to be intermediate certificates. So what you're actually asserting when you assert trust in the root of trust is that you trust that party to go build a certification authority.
So you have a trust relationship where the context is you're happy for them to do that thing.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. I like that. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of uses outside our our sphere. So when I buy a house, there is what we call in the UK a land registry, which is imbued with authority. It is a authority, and it can decide to grant powers to other parties, and it is the endorsing authority, and the powers become.
I don't think this is a good example because it's
Okay,
inherently
all right.
nationalistic, and the way that the systems are built
It's
vary
different.
by
Okay, fair
nation
enough.
state.
Okay, well, let's try and think of a different one then. The problem is lots of these are nation state ones, or they're religious, right? Because authority is a thing, and I'm not sure I want to go down religious conversations. Manny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just trying to bring it down a little bit with, shouldn't we try to define this specifically for what we're trying to do, which is confidential computing, which really ties it back to the fact that it's the chip manufacturer that imbues that chip with its own identity and its ability to prove its identity and do the attestation, go through the attestation process. So for me, the confidential computing is not a general, I mean, we shouldn't try to do a general description of root of trust. We should really anchor it in the nature of what it is that we do. So there's a chip manufacturer and chip designer that are the endorsing authorities. And then the root of trust is the hardware level, chip level capability to be remotely attested and verified.
I kind of like that.
My perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and the key principle here is that there's no entity is allowed to endorse itself. But there's a separate problem, which is that if you have party A endorsing party B, the amount of operations that need to be able to keep that system functional over time requires a dynamic trust in party A. And we need some way to establish a long-term static, that's why the term static is in here, a long-term static relationship with party A to do those dynamic operations on our behalf. And that's why the trust anchor is the static party, where you are saying, I trust the trust anchor to go do the dynamic operations so that we can have an endorsement system, so that I can have some assurances about the identity and properties of a particular piece of hardware. And this same chain actually applies across all three of the supply chains, because confidential compute is, we tend to think of it as primarily a privacy technology, but it's actually a supply chain technology where you have three different supply chains, that is hardware, firmware, and software. And all three of those supply chains end up getting combined into a particular compute instance, where you have to be able to track all of the artifacts back to their supply chain provenance. And so the endorsement is sort of the last step in that supply chain, where you can tie a particular compute instance to the specific artifacts that exist in the supply chain.
And I think there's an interesting thing to note as well, given the entity for whom, organization for whom Nathaniel works, in that the way this happens in the industry is not the same across all chips and technologies, because whereas Intel and AMD are directly are endorsing authorities for the static root of trust, the keys or the certificates in the chips, that relationship is not direct in the case of ARM, because there will be licensees, Fujitsu or Mitsubishi or Intel or Apple or whoever it may be, who are actually there's going to be a chain of trust through them into the certificate, which is part of the chip. So it's
but
not direct.
The world is also increasingly looking like that ARM model across the board, right? With the creation of Intel Foundry Services, for example. So it's not. We are unique as an institution in that we've done that earlier, but I think that those parties all still exist. They're just adjacent organizations within a single institution in some cases. So
I 100% agree. So I didn't mean to pull you out particularly. I just was trying to make the point that it's not simple, and here's one example of it not being simple, and we're going to have more of the lack of simplicity and complexity.
Yeah, I wasn't criticizing you on that point. The reason I was trying to emphasize that was that if we think about confidential computing as a supply chain technology, it is insufficient to simply say, once you cross an institutional boundary, that we can stop caring about the provenance of the supply chain. I don't think the world is going to work that way, and I think that people are going to want to pull apart those internal relationships. And so once you recognize that those relationships are actually inherent to the process itself, we can begin to actually have a model to express those relationships.
Okay, Manu, I think your hand's up again.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Nathaniel. I think it's a very good way to look at the problem. And I forgot, you mentioned 3 supply chains, which say was hardware, firmware, and
Hardware,
software.
firmware, and software, right? So I
Yeah,
think this
I
as
actually think there's a 4th one. And the 4th one is the design supply chain. And so that's how I would separate ARM, for instance, from the actual manufacturer of the chip, because the manufacturer is the one that provides integrity or endorses or certifies the integrity of the manufacturing process. And so there is a design supply chain upstream of the actual event where the chip is manufactured, and that the manufacturer that has physical control and physical security around the process of creating the chip per the design files, right? So there's an upstream process of a design supply chain, which is going to evolve very much with chiplets and the combination of multiple IP onto the same chips. All that ends up, there's an event where the chip is, did not exist a second before, now exists and has its own identity and its ability to prove its integrity with endorsement by the chip manufacturer, so the actual foundry. So I think there's 4 supply chains, and it's the fabrication, the coming into being of the chip that is the how to say that, the nexus of those 4 supply chains.
Well, let me articulate it a different way. I agree with you, but I want to articulate it slightly differently. There's not one designer at the start of the process. There could be multiple designers. For example, you can get a memory controller from, Rambus, or you can get, core IP from ARM, et cetera. And so there's a plurality of designers. What I would argue, however, is that IP is that designing IP is the foundation of the hardware supply chain. So it still exists within the hardware supply chain. You essentially end up with designers at the top. Then you have a SIP who actually does the integration. They offload it to a fab. The fab actually creates the chip. Then you have to register that thing with an endorser, right? The endorser is actually what I care a lot about these days. We have to register it to some sort of endorsing agency who is the party who can do these dynamic operations to actually produce a certificate chain for a particular chip instance. That particular bit of hardware then gets combined with a firmware supply chain, which is again discrete, and with a software supply chain, which is the actual workload that gets deployed. All 3 of those get combined into an attestation report. And so the attestation report is that nexus where the 3 supply chains combine, and we can actually begin to measure those supply chains.
Yeah, much better articulated than I did, but yes, I agree with you.
Okay, so
well, hang on.
done.
I'll say this: the having read as a novice the white papers that were written in the CCC, I think the lack of sort of names of technology vendors that I was familiar with made it a lot harder to internalize the information. I believe that the kinds of explanations that have just been articulated here, and especially adding the names of familiar software and hardware companies that make use of these technologies and maybe give examples, would really make the information more credible and more digestible by big security organizations like CSA, because we've been talking to the folks at CSA. There is such a large gap between where they are and the need to include terms like root of trust in their documentation so that you can actually believe in the security that's provided by confidential computing, but the complete lack of understanding of what root of trust means isn't bridged by them going to a vocabulary word like this and looking at a few sentences. Real world examples like the ones that we've just been describing, I think would do wonders. So I'd like to just get
So,
I don't know if
Alec,
that
I
belongs
have-
in a blog or
I
a
have good
vocabulary
news and
one.
bad news for you, Alec. The
Okay.
good news is the TAC is absolutely tasked with doing those sorts of things if we think that it's a useful thing to be doing. The bad news is you've just volunteered yourself, because that's how it works. Not to write all of it, but maybe to make a start and think about what it would look like. So if the TAC feels that this is something we should be doing, then which I think it might be, then well done.
I'll agree on one condition, and that is that you also, since you volunteered me, you volunteer Nathaniel to work with me.
Oh yeah,
on
he's easily volunteered.
Mike,
No, I'm all
Mike's
over
not
that.
my boss anymore. He can't volunteer me. So no, I actually wanted to volunteer myself. I actually have an internal ARM document that lays out what I call roles in this regard, that basically talks about no matter how the roles are combined, different institutions can combine them in different ways, but they exist as a natural part of the process. And basically, I define these roles like designer, like integrator, like fabricator, etc. And then I list all of those. Now, this is an internal document, but I'm fairly certain there's no problem with me working on publicizing that document within the context of the TAC. So if you'd like to work with me on that, Alec, I'm happy to work on it with you.
Yeah, and I just know that we have examples of this, right? Where we purchase. I'm speaking for Microsoft here, where we purchase hardware silicon from vendors. The designs are done in combination with several entities, and as you said, all of these things come together at the end in a piece of silicon that's got an endorsement key written on it. And I think customers need to understand that that's as good as we can do these days, a root of trust, but that implicitly means that you trust a group of organizations, commercial organizations, to provide that functionality. I think I said that right. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that I'd love to hammer out.
Yeah, and I think that there can be changes in the supply chain, but what ends up happening is that at the end of the supply chain, you have what I'm calling an endorser. And in the endorser is the party that is responsible for everything that is north of them in the supply chain, whatever configuration that exists in. They're the party that puts their stamp of approval saying, I'm going to maintain identities of chips that are part of this supply chain. And that endorser, by the way, this is a spoiler. I'm working on producing a design for this. I'm not going to do it myself, but I'm going to try to have somebody else do it within ARM. What I think we need is we're going to end up needing far more dynamic relationships between verifiers who are going to verify these attestation reports and the endorsers themselves. And those dynamic relationships can only be built when you actually have standard data types and protocols to actually retrieve the information from the endorsers. So that essentially means we need some sort of standards and protocols and possibly an open source implementation of those to actually provide that. And one of the weird things that's happened sort of in the CCC within confidential computing in general, I'm not blaming the body, is that we've ended up building verifiers before we actually had the dynamic relationships from the endorsers, which means we have a producer-consumer relationship, but we built the consumers before we built the producers, which is one of the reasons why we're struggling, I think, in the attestation world to put something together that we can all agree upon. And it's because we've wanted to define the consumer part of the relationship without defining the producer part of the relationship.
So we've had, I think, more than 15 minutes. This is why I love the TAC, and why I love the CCC, because we actually have these really important conversations. I know it can be a bit daunting for people who aren't kind of in the weeds, but I think this is really important. But this is not my call; it's Dan's call, and I wanted to sort of hand over to him, whilst just having a little chuckle that I did say this is going to kick off 6 months of work again, and here we are. But Dan, what do you want to do next?
Yes, so this is our call, and our next topic is going to be hearing from Dale. But before we hand the floor to Dale, I want to make sure that we don't drop some of these conclusions on the floor as we step away. So if Alec and Nathaniel could type into chat the action that you think you just signed up for, then Rion or Ben or whoever's noting this can make sure that we have that.
And I will absolutely put my hand up to be part of this as well. I'd say it's very much part of my role, so I'm happy to be taking part in this. If only so I can correct Nathaniel all the time, because that's part of what I've been doing for the last 5-6 years. And why should I stop now?
Right.
When I say correct, be corrected by.
The the second thing that I'd ask people to do is just take 60 seconds right now before we switch topics. And within the doc, I saw Alec was very helpfully capturing some notes. I don't know that we got all of the salient points in that very interesting discussion. So I know it's uncommon to have silence during a group call like this, but let's go ahead and take a minute just to get some suggested text or comments into the Google Doc itself.
I can't even find it now. I've got so many windows open. Here we go.
Mike, since you probably have both Alex and my contact information, would you mind brokering a meeting with the three of us?
I'm not sure I do have Alex information, but Alec, if you would just let me have it now. I will. Do I have it there? I don't know where it is.
I just put it in chat.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay,
Thanks, Alec.
so I will send an email to us all now to start thinking about when times would be.
Got this OC3 paper next week, so after that would be better.
Okay, Dale, while people are wrapping up their last sentences here, feel free to get your materials up. Get you kicked off in just a sec.
You guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so thanks, Dale, for coming to give the annual update for the Keystone project. For everybody's benefit, we have an annual review process for all of our projects. And I think the main goal of this is less about oversight and really more about staying in communication with our projects as an open source organization. Really, it's the projects that are our kind of first and foremost goal here. So Dale will be walking through the update, but I have pasted into chat the structure that we give our projects so that they know some of the conversation points to come back with. And with that, I will hand things over to Dale.
Hello, yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm Dial, and I'm from Keystone Project, and thank you for inviting me here. So I'll go over the Keystone annual review for this year. So for a brief reminder, the goals of the project is three things. One is enable T on almost all RISC-V processors. So we want to follow the RISC-V standard ISA. So so that if anyone has a standard RISC-V chip, they can easily enable T on their platform. Second one is to make T easy to customize depending on the needs. So we have a base implementation and a platform specific implementation, and most of the parts are in software. So we came up with this customizable T concept and borrow from the software-defined network and have software like configure the hardware primitives to implement necessary functionalities and security requirements. And also this allows us to reuse a lot of implementations across multiple platforms instead of like rebuilding everything for each of the platform. Third one is to reduce the cost of building TE. By doing this project, we want to reduce the hardware integration cost, and then also reduce the verification cost, and also integrate with existing software tools. So let me go through the annual review process. So basically, we're in incubation state, and our mentor is Lee Serman. She was not able to join today because she is sick. But yeah, I hope that yeah, we'll sync up later. So we'll talk about 5 things which are in the annual review process: technical charter, progression status, and then budget allocation and license scans, and finally OpenSSF best practices batch. This is new to me, so I believe we'll talk about it after. So for the technical charter and license scans, those are unchanged, so I'll skip those. For the progression status, I'll talk about what was the key milestone from the previous review and talk about like the next steps. So previously we had a problem with the application support and also the hardware support because of the lack of open source. Lack of commercial RISC-V hardware. It was extremely hard to get one that people can just pour Keystone over and try. And also, like, it's very hard to run like any existing application into the Keystone because Keystone likes a lot of things. Also, we thought that our implementation is not in parity with industry standards like measure boot or attestation. Those are pretty the early version of those are like pretty much a prototype, so they don't have necessary fields or necessary protocols, and it doesn't follow like a lot of standards. So those are like our key milestones. So we focused on improving these things last year. So last year we had several people contributing to Keystone, including the David Kohlbrenner's group at University of Washington and Don Song's group at University of Berkeley. So it's still very academic project, but like there are people still trying to improve it. For the better hardware and application support, now we're able to support like dynamic loading of binaries. This was a big change of Keystone. And the second one is the integration of the build root build system. So thanks to this, it's now much easier to port Keystone over to any RISC-V hardware because it's built as a part of the build root. Another work in progress is structure measurement. I'll briefly explain it. This is like what allows you to run applications very easily without having to worry about like all the dynamic libraries. So these are like some are research projects, some are not, some are just engineering, but like we're on track on the better hardware and application support right now. For the parity with industry standard, so this has been lagged because we're not able to make informed decision on this because we kind of researched on like standard, like what is the standard of the measure boot, for example. It was really hard to figure out. I do know there's at least a few groups that works on this, like SPDM group or the ATLS, like IATF, RATS, and standards and so on. I don't think those are like ratified yet. and also they're also work in progress in my understanding. So we're kind of waiting until there is a standard for this kind of components like a measure boot and attestation. So we're holding on that a little bit. So for the final thing, we're establishing collaboration with external entities. One is the RISC-V SMMTT standard integration. So now RISC-V has a new feature called SMMTT, which allows you to control. It's more fine-grained the current PMP-based memory isolation. It allows you to reduce the segmentation issue that Keystone has. So we're kind of working on that. For the RISC-V apt working group, it was recommended last year by the committee to like reach out to them. I realized that the apt working group, they're more focusing on the mobile, like mobile chips, like more embedded chips that it's not like what we're targeting for. So it got off track.
Why don't we pause on this slide for a minute, especially since you mentioned some difficulty with industry standard, with attaching parity with industry standards.
Yeah.
So I would expect some people on here to have some reaction to that. Can you just maybe repeat for everybody? I think one of the things I heard was measured boot.
Yeah. So what we do is so Keystone is mainly the entire stack from the hardware level to the software. For the hardware integration, though, we require hardware to provide a hardware root of trust. I saw the terminology discussion was going on before, but the hardware root of trust we defined was like the secure key storage, and then the measure boot, like trusted measure boot that is inside immutable process that happens whenever you boot the machine. So that requires some, boot ROM, and that involves a lot, some hardware components, and it requires some hardware, properties. Like let's say the secret key store that needs to be only readable by like the security monitor, for example, and then you cannot modify it after you produce a chip, for example. These are like we don't have any standard for. I mean, we weren't able to find what is the standard way of doing that. So what we did was we made a lot of assumptions. So this hasn't been changed since the project has started. When the project started, we made a lot of assumptions on the hardware. Like let's say hardware provides the boot ROM, and like boot ROM has properties like it's not modifiable, it's not viewable by, like low privilege software, and so on. We made these kind of assumptions and then made very prototype measure boot process, which measures and signs the security monitor component, and then like derive the key based on some keys, fuse keys in the hardware, and then we use that process to perform the remote attestation inside the enclave. And then for that part as well, like we also made a prototype for the attestation, where the user process, the enclave can provide some arbitrary data to the security monitor, and then security monitor can, sign the entire report, so that this field can be used as a, used to bind anything like the DPMM parameters or, the other identity. So that's what we did. We wanted to make it more be on parity with the industry standard. Like I know that we know that there were like bad standard. Or for the measure boot, I think that the Microsoft has like DICE, but I don't think I think it's a spec, but I don't I wasn't able to find like enough resources to, you know, translate this into a specific implementation of ourselves. So that's
let's maybe
yeah.
pause on that question then. So with measured boots and things like dice, anybody have some thoughts for Dale on standard, either formally standard or sort of de facto standards to producing measured boot?
Dale, why don't you reach out to me offline and maybe I can connect you with some folks that know a little bit about dice.
Okay.
That was Alec Fernandez talking.
Yeah.
Connect to his email.
Yeah, I'll connect with you.
Thanks, Alec. Any other thoughts on that?
Thanks for pausing on that, Dan. That was a good pause.
Okay, and then the second question I heard there was beginning to be something about rats related or similar
Yes.
standards for producing attestations.
Yeah, I think what we're missing is like reference implementation of this, because there is like Intel RATLS implementation. Sorry, RATS and the TLS. So there are two things. The attested TLS. I wonder whether there's like a standard first of all, and then if there is a standard, what is the best reference implementation that we can refer to for the RATs for remote attestation? If there's any standard, there's ratified, and then if there's like what is the reference implementation that I can refer to? So RATS and the ATLS, I think those are.
Okay, so yeah, let me sort of rephrase that. So there's how you communicate an attestation in a general sense, and then how you do it integrated with an existing protocol. So RATS gives you this, I'm trying to think how Dave used to refer to it, a recipe for making a recipe. I think that was a poor recollection of how he speaks to it, but it provides patterns and terminology. And I don't think that there's like a specific protocol that comes out of RATS that you'd be able to. Anybody feel free to.
Yeah.
And then within the attestation SIG at the CCC, we've done improvements on both RATLS and attested TLS. And from my recollection, are very similar approaches to including the evidence within the handshake, within the TLS handshake. So RATLS, I think you will find something approaching a specification in the attestation SIG, and I'll dig up the link for you. And then I think attested TLS was submitted to what's the organization that would have been submitted to? Okay, in Internet RFC.
ITF?
May have been. I'll have to look and see where that goes. But both of those projects have repos in the attestation signal for you for those.
So then my question is, for the remote attestation, is there any like ongoing efforts to standardize the attestation process? Like,
yeah, so the attestation SIG regularly discusses a whole variety of standards related aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these are, let's say, format oriented. So there's all sorts of things like JSON and CBOR that have there's different structures that you can make with these things. that
Mhm.
use attestation. I think one of the things I just heard from Nathaniel in the last conversation was, despite having those messages, there isn't necessarily a message protocol over that. For if we were to look at the RATS diagram of actors and components, there's the attester sending a message to a vendor, to a verifier, or to a relying party, and there's two different usually cited patterns for that: the background check and the passport model. And it's kind of like, do you get a endorsed artifact that you can then go show other people as an attester, or do you ask each one of the people that you are trying to authenticate with to go independently check that with another entity?
I see. So the protocol, I mean, is more like lower level stuff. Like, for example, like what kind of fields should go inside a remote attestation report? How many bytes do you allow users to specify? And what kind of crypto algorithm you need to use for signing the report, or measure what kind of crypto algorithm you need to use for measuring the state,
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah, so I think some of that is specified, and there's emerging standards for that in entity attestation. I think it's entity attestation reports, EAT tokens, and
Put the link in the chat.
Oh, thank you. So some of that is out there in different levels of maturity. But another thing I could suggest you do is bring these questions to an attestation SIG meeting. They are very open to have these conversations. And I don't think you need to worry about being too narrow or specific with the question, because they'll be able to guide you into the right path, into that level of specificity that you're looking for.
I think that
Yeah,
the colleagues that I referenced earlier, I believe, are members of the attestation SIG, and we could probably coordinate to have, a mutually agreed upon date for a discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much for the info.
It's really cool that you brought this, to a group of people that, despite boring folks to tears, can sometimes, provide links to resources.
Yeah.
It's literally why we do this. Absolutely, really good. I'm very pleased.
Yeah, I can continue to the next slide, maybe. Okay, so this year we hope to set up like growth goals towards graduation stage. We really want to make it a production level. So there are a lot of technical improvements that we will need before that. For example, we need more application hardware support. It's work in progress, but I believe there are still several technical challenges that makes it hard to port over to the hardware. So we're going to focus on those technical challenges. We haven't started the hardware integration. I think that is kind of blocked by the, what we discussed like earlier, like the measure boot and attestation. I think the measure boot that definitely needs to, I definitely needs to take a look at the industry standard and produce some hardware, like produce some guideline how someone can integrate Keystone to their own hardware platform. Like, what is the requirement? We can clarify what is the requirement, what they can do, and so on. So by doing that, I believe this can be more tangible. So for hardware integration, we're not gonna do that by ourselves. We're probably going to partner with other RISC-V hardware vendors who are interested. For the maintenance, I believe that we don't have like good version planning or contributor program. And also because only a few people are contributing to the repo, there's no reliable contribution pipeline, like the CI/CD documentation, there's no rules for, like, for example, when you have to release, you have to fix all the issues in the documentation. We don't have that kind of rules yet. We're doing it ad hoc. So we'll probably improve the maintenance pipeline for this project this year. Finally, I think one of the thing we need to work on is the inclusion and diversity, because right now it's only a university and it's kind of closed community, because we have a Slack channel, but it's like an invite only for internal people. But I think we would like to make it more open. So we would like to have an open communication channel, have a community meetings, monthly community meetings, and also, you know, make these kind of milestones visible to other folks so that they can learn about the project easily.
And since you were here last, we hired a technical community architect to help facilitate a variety of things for projects. So you may have gotten a ping from Sal Kimmich already, but
yeah, I got a So I had a question about that. So they asked me to give a admin permission to the repo. But one of the maintainer was concerned about like that because we didn't know the person, but I believe that they're it's related to the OpenSSF. It's my guess.
So Sal is employed by the CCC as a consultant by the LF.
Okay.
That is, and works for the CCC. And yes, the main thing that they are wanting maintainer privilege for, I believe, Ben Rian may want to add, is for the OpenSSF measurements and monitoring pieces.
Okay. Do you recommend us to just give a admin access?
That's always a decision for the project. Other projects have. I believe there's ways around doing it if you prefer not to, but you should definitely. I would never just advise someone to give up, but they are a trusted person in terms of being employed by the CCC.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, so I think I'll just give a
no, which is you've done exactly the right thing, right? So I approve.
I will need access to your bank account though, and your social security number, so you can just.
I quite like the names and birthdays of all of your children and nieces and nephews is another good one.
Yeah. So just sort of repeat what Mike said, I guess, that you are not obligated to give access, but the intent that Sal is looking for is to take a look at the security posture of the repo. It is related to, but not necessarily one-for-one with the Open Source Security Foundation's best practices badge. But we can talk about that. Well, I suppose we could talk about that now as long as we're paused on it. The other though, so that is one specific initiative that Sal is working on is some of the security posture stuff. But the other thing is that they're well acquainted with how to facilitate new contributors for your community. And so Sal is there to help out projects. So feel free to set up time with Sal to get some best practices on that front.
Okay, understood.
So the badge itself, since we're paused on that topic, the OpenSSF inherited this thing from a previous organization that was called CII, but it's a set of best practices for projects to use for security. And there are things that might be obvious to some people, like don't roll your own crypto. And there might be less obvious things like that you should have a secure reporting functionality. So if somebody discovers a vulnerability, how they can do that. And I would recommend that as you go and take a look at that, there's a simple website that you go to that you put in the URL of your project, and there's a series of self-guided questions to do self-reporting. But Sal or myself can walk you through that if you like. And there is also the Gramming project, which is one of your peer projects in the CCC, has adopted that badge very recently. And so you could take a look at their project to see how that's reported. There's like a little badge thing that you put in your README that shows your status.
I see. So how does the evaluation work? Do they like manually evaluate each of the requirements for the badge and then allow me to put the badge on the website, or is it like automatically done?
So you'll get there's a little line of code that you put in your README that will report your badge status, and then for each aspect of the badge, it is self-reported. So it'll
Okay.
ask you, do you have like a public record of issues? And if you're on a GitHub project, which almost everybody is, you're going to get like half of that badge for free, because all of these best practices are sort of existent on GitLab or GitHub. You've got public issues, you've got the code history.
I see.
There's a formal commit method. So you'll get a lot of it for free, and then the rest of it will be self-reported, like we did not write our own crypto, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah,
Assuming
sounds
that's
good.
the case,
So
then please let it be the case.
So I'll need to talk to Sal to get help with going through this.
Yeah, and
Is that correct?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can move on to the next slide. So we were not using any budget so far, but I believe this year we may want some budget allocation. For the GitHub team, we're not very sure, but since we're using the GitHub Action, we don't know if the free tier is enough. So far, it's enough, but we may want to upgrade the plan at some point once the CI/CD minutes runs out. For the test infrastructure, because we already integrated and we kind of managed to run CI/CD pipeline on like hardware devices connected in our like office, one of the maintainers' office. But we do want to purchase more RISC-V hardware to construct this CI/CD environment by ourselves, and it will require us. This is a rough estimate. I honestly don't know how much we'll need, but it will be less than 2,500 because the RISC-V for each of the RISC-V for ranges about like $100 to $1,000, and we may need like 3 or 4 of them. So yeah, we may want to purchase the hardware. For the video conferencing open communication channel, we're still discussing internally about like how we want to have it. So we'll need to figure out like what kind of software we're going to use, how frequent we're going to use. And I don't think maybe the video conferencing may not require, because there's already a free conference call services like Google Meets and all that. So these are TBD. But I think one thing for sure is the test infrastructure will probably need this budget for hardware purchases. So yeah, go ahead.
Ben, Ryan, do the projects have easy access to LFX for managing meetings and video conferences?
Yep, we can essentially make folks, there's a role that they can be given that allows them to schedule meetings, no problem. So yeah, we can provide that to you when you need it. The other thing I would mention is for GitHub, you start running into some limits there with the free tier. Reach out to me. There's a couple options that we might have. We might be able to just give you, $100 a month just for GitHub Actions, right? And you may not have to upgrade the whole account. We also can sometimes get just additional resources from GitHub for free. So definitely reach out to me about that. And then for test infrastructure, yep, just you'll work with me on reimbursements for those, but just work with me before you do the purchase order so that we can understand exactly what the costs are and just make sure everything is okay before you actually spend the money.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Great. There was just one other thing I realized we glided over on slide 7 for the outreach intern. You've got, I guess, are you saying that you're targeting end of the year to pick up an intern?
Yeah, I realized that the earlier round has already been finished, so that's why we're targeting end of the year round.
Okay, so one of the things that Yash is working on, and he just had to leave, is making that more flexible for when we take on interns. So there's outreach is what we've used up to this point, but there's a couple other programs out there. And I know you're in good contact with Lily, so I think Lily's also up to speed on that, so you can ask, or I think Rion's got some feedback immediately. So go ahead.
Yes, the mentorship program, there is most organizations use a structure just because they have so many to put through. But I reached out to LFX and to folks at CNCF. There's not a specific, you don't have to follow an exact cycle. You don't have to do only 3 months, you can do longer. So Sol is busy putting together the information to set up the mentorship program inside CCC. And then you submit your requirement, and Sol is specifically looking at finding mentors that is more master's or PhD students, so actually a high quality of student that would really fit in with something that you would be interested in. So I would ask Sol to reach out, and then you can discuss the mentorship, the open SSF, and all those needs, and we can try and set it up as soon as possible.
Understood.
Any other questions for Dale? Okay. Well, thanks for coming and giving us the update, and thanks for continuing to volunteer your time to run a project at the CCC.
Yeah, thank you for the review.
Nice job, Dale. I enjoyed that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's that was all for the review. Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, so we will switch back to today's agenda and that's the bulk of the agenda with one exception. Let's get the deck back up here. We already discussed what we're going to do for the 21st. What I would like is that we populate this calendar better. And so if we were to go into our TAC goals, will hopefully be we've got leads from each of the companies, and we'll view into this quickly here, Ming-Shen, because you haven't been around for these earlier discussions. But we've got 3 different goal areas, each with about 3 different key results or KPIs that we want to build out. And the goal is that we can do working sessions on these or provide report outs to these on a regular cadence. And the end result of that is at the end of the year, we've all accomplished something together that we've decided up front are the meaningful things that we want to do. And that way we're not sort of from week to week trying to build out what the agenda is that we're going to work on. Ben has already reached out to each of you to get you slotted on this. I will say that in addition to the voting members of the TAC who have direct responsibility for these things, this is an open and collaborative group. And so where anybody feels like they would like to provide leadership for any of those topics, you can to put your hand up for those, and we can get you slotted to either lead a working session on it or provide a report out on something that you've been working on.
I would just note that I've met some interesting people at conferences recently and kind of suggested they might want to come and talk to us about things. I'm trying to push some of those forward. Don't have dates for them yet, but I think we have some interesting things to talk about. Thank you.
Yeah, so for the tech, for the goal topics, we want to make sure that we've got responsibilities set out, and then similarly, I expect that each of your companies is already doing interesting work here. That's why you're at these meetings, and we'd like to stay apprised of recent technical advancements, and this is a great place to put those in front of the community. All right, well, we will leave scheduling that offline to your conversations with Ben or myself. You can do that through Slack or through email. But again, the goal is to have this thing populated out for at least the next couple of months.
Dan,
Go ahead.
If I can talk a little bit, 2 things. First of all, I've been listening to most of the session today through my car, and the volume of your voice is somehow much lower than others.
It is. I've noticed that as well. Yes, thank you.
But everyone was shy, and I'm the rude one. So just saying that. If I may say about the glossary, I feel that there is a need to define what is the problem that we're trying to solve with this glossary, and what is the audience for each level of that glossary, because the discussion went sometimes very deep. At the beginning, there was an intent to provide something for, our mothers in a way. So I think that if we have a definition of the problem that we're trying to solve, and it might be multiple problems, and the audience or audiences that we're trying to approach, it can help in figuring out how to write each part of the text.
Okay, yeah, so I've just bumped up my mic gain. Hopefully that's better.
That's better.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I had to switch mics halfway through the call. So Mike can correct me, but the original request came from our discussions with the CSA, where they wanted some readily available definitions that they could refer to, and maybe some other conversations people have had that it would be nice if we just had human readable definitions. And Mike's sage advice was, if we don't have a fuller definition backing something high level, that's just going to create a problem. So while the initial goal is to create something that, as you said, our mothers can understand, we need to have a complete definition that backs that.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, and I heard that and agreed, nodded in the car to the car front when Mike said that. No disagreement, but I think that if there is an aim to provide a certain part of this effort for the layman from the street, that it's important to put it, and to, based on that, we have
it should be in the document. We should define it. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Some of this stuff has been sort of implicit, and it should be explicit. So thank you for pointing out. Yes.
And I'll say this: the use case that gave rise to the need for the vocabulary site is the Cloud Security Alliance has a big controls document that is several hundred pages long. And we're trying to, and it talks about, all things like, use safe passwords and make sure you use TLS, 1.3 and so forth. And then in that we say, hey, and while you're doing all these great security things, use confidential computing. And every single one of them said, confidential computing, what the heck is that? And these are security professionals. And so we said, well, confidential computing, and we gave them the terminology paper definition. And they said, what is, a hardware-based, attested, trusted execution environment? And if they're halfway through a controls document that's several hundred pages long, and they branch into the terminology paper at the CCC, then they've lost continuity. So we need the primer definition, as you've sort of been hinting at. That, I think, is absolutely true. And then if that links back into a deeper doc, that's great. And that's why I keep saying it needs to have practical examples from technologies that these regulators will appreciate. So if it's got the name of providers of hardware, if it's got the names of providers of operating systems and software applications that are recognizable by these regulators, then boy, that really keeps them grounded. That's what I'm looking for. I don't know if everyone agrees, but that's kind of what I'm going to campaign for.
Works for me. Okay. One other topic, Vinny in chat is asking that if we've got some expertise in the audience to talk about the EU policies. And I'm not sure exactly which ones those might be, but each, the US government has recent executive orders on things, and there's some similar things that have been enacted in the EU. We do have the governance, risk, and compliance SIG, which involves people who are subject matter experts in compliance. And Mark Novak, who's on the call, who leads that team. And one of the things that we talked about for the next meeting is coming in to do some work on one or more of the documents that they're shepherding right now. So we might be able to solicit that kind of content from that part of the community. So if you've got a specific act, I can't remember actually the name of an EU act that somebody was talking about yesterday. But the more specific you can be about what you're looking to find out, the more readily we can find that expert.
Sure, Dan.
So there's-
Yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. I just want to mention that, it has been coming up a lot recently, as there are EU laws, which we need to make sure we comply with. So I was wondering if somebody is aware of those policies and regulation updates, who can share, that would be great. I can provide more context on the request, and if we can find somebody, I can reach out to Mark. Thank you, Dan.
Please provide us with that context. This is a complex area, and as far as I'm aware, it has not been fully tested yet. So this is the right place to be having those discussions.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, I think we are at roughly the end of the time, and we're certainly at the end of agenda. So I will release everybody to their next meetings. Thanks, everybody, for the contributions today.
Thanks, everyone. Great meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Bye.